Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a former Boeing 737 pilot and a member of the PMDG 737 tech team. Welcome to our tutorial on how to handle an engine failure during takeoff. So let's start with a little bit of theory before we go into executing everything in practice. And there are a couple of things that we should be aware of. We're going to start with some general procedures and considerations. So let's start by discussing how to fly this. So what is the procedure that we are going to execute? And we can simply quote the text of the emergency briefing here, which is kind of what I used to do when I flew the 737. So if the call before V1 is keep going, there will be no actions below 400 feet except to cancel any warnings and raise the landing gear with a positive rate of climb. At 400 feet, verify heading select and carry out the memory items. At the MFRA, buck up and retract the flaps on schedule, flaps up no light, select level change, max continuous thrust, engage the automatics, non-normal checklist, normal checklist, and then we decide on the further course of action. So that's how we are going to handle the engine failure in terms of what we are going to fly. Now, let's have a quick look into the quick reference handbook to see what our memory items that we are going to do at 400 feet are actually going to be. Now, this is from the old PMDG QRH that came with the 737 NGX in FSX like 14 years ago. Unfortunately, they are no longer allowed to distribute this with new products, but I still kept my old one, so here's what it looks like. Now, that line down here, that dashed line, indicates that everything above it in a checklist is a memory item. So here we go, engine fire or engine severe damage or separation checklist. Note that this does not constitute a normal engine failure. Normal engine failure, completely different thing, doesn't have memory items. This is only if you've got an engine fire, severe damage, or an engine separation, which means that the entire engine has detached from your aircraft. Normal loss of thrust on an engine, completely different thing. So, let's go into the procedure. So, conditions. One or more of these occur: an engine fire warning, airframe vibrations with unusual engine indications, or engine separation. Auto throttle if engaged, disengage. That's because if we would not disengage the auto throttle would simply increase thrust on the broken engine again and undo what we are going to do in step number 2, which is thrust lever, affected engine, confirm, close. The way that this is done is that the pilot flying is going to put his hand on the thrust lever, so the pilot monitoring will say thrust lever, for example, engine number 1, confirm, then the pilot flying puts the hand on the thrust lever, pilot monitoring says confirmed, close. Then we got the engine start lever, affected engine, confirm, cutoff. The start lever is operated by the pilot monitoring. So again, pilot monitoring says engine start lever, for example, engine number 1, confirm, puts the hand on there. Then the pilot flying looks at it, verifies that the hand is on the correct engine start lever, says confirmed, or engine number 1, confirmed, and then the pilot monitoring moves it to cutoff. Then you got the engine fire switch affected engine, confirm, pull. To manually unlock the engine fire switch, press the override and pull. That's rather important because the switch is only unlocked if an actual fire is detected. However, we always want to pull that switch because it does not just arm the fire extinguishing system, it also disconnects the accessory gearbox from the engine. So things like the hydraulic pumps and the generator are all going to be disconnected through that one switch. So then again, confirm pull, this is done by the pilot monitoring. And then finally we got if the engine fire switch or engine overheat light stays illuminated, engine fire switch, rotate to the stop and hold for 1 second. If after 30 seconds the engine fire switch or engine overheat light stays illuminated, engine fire switch, rotate to the other stop and hold for 1 second. And that's the memory items complete. So as you can see, you got 2 fire extinguishing bottles And if the first one doesn't extinguish the engine after 30 seconds, then the second one is also fired into that same engine. Note that you no longer have any capabilities to extinguish the other engine should a fire break out over there. You only have 2 bottles which can be routed into each engine. Alright, so that's the memory items. Now, as mentioned, if you just have a normal engine failure, the memory items are not applicable, so in that case we would have to do nothing. So no memory items, just clean the airplane up, do the non-normal checklist. And that one is done right out of the book. So how do we determine whether we got an engine severe damage or whether we just have a normal engine failure, aka flameout? That's determined by looking at the gauges. So once the engine failure happens, we are looking at 3 things. You got the N1 gauge and you got the N2 gauge. And if a severe damage happens, we assume that either one of them is no longer rotating. Then you also have the engine failed flag that may show on the EGT gauge. Now, it does that when the N2 falls below a certain percentage. I do believe it's 50%, but not 100% sure anymore. It's already been like 3 years since I've flown the 737. Incredible. So, those are the important criteria here. If you've got 0 N1 or 0 N2, that's your criterion that you have an engine severe damage. Obviously, with a fire, it's quite clear if either of the fire switches are illuminated, or if the engine overheat light is illuminated, which is located down here, which Boeing thinks is in your primary field of vision. I do not tend to agree with that. But that's how Boeing built the aircraft. So that's how we identify whether we've got normal engine failure or whether we got an engine severe damage, which would include memory items. The reason we don't have memory items for a normal engine failure is that we don't have any rush in case of a normal engine failure. So the engine is just off. You don't need to immediately secure it from any danger. So most likely reason is just an engine flameout during the takeoff. Well, and that's what we can say about the basics. So we got the memory items covered and we got the procedure covered. Now let's talk a little bit about flying the aircraft. In all takeoffs we have an engine out SID. In some takeoffs that one includes turns. So where can we find information about how to navigate the airplane? Well, normally that would be in the takeoff performance calculator in the real world. Unfortunately, we do not have that data available in Flight Simulator, but what we do have is a superb database from fellow YouTuber Blackbox711. Just go to his website, blackbox711.com, go to the web app, and in there you can select airport briefings. Today we're in Cologne, Bonn in Germany, and we're taking off from runway 13 left. There's a little bit of data in here that we want to know. First things first, the acceleration altitude, which is 1,900 feet for this particular runway. And this is what we've set using the minimum selector for our takeoff. So that's the so-called minimum flap retraction altitude, or MFRA. We always set that one during the pre-flight procedure, and this is where to get it from. Now, from there, we also have the engine out SID, and that one takes us straight ahead to 60 ME from Kilo Bravo Oscar, and then left turn to Whiskey Yankee Papa to enter the holding. So how are we going to mark that on our nav display? Now, let's go ahead and have a look. So the distance is usually done through the fix page. So we got Kilo Bravo Oscar, and then we entered /6. And that draws that green ring over here, which indicates the 6 DME point. Then we're going to proceed to Whiskey Yankee Papa, which I've marked on fixed page number 2, and which we can see at the nav display. So, as you can see, the engine out sits straight ahead over here, and then a left turn flying over here to enter a holding. Now, a small trick that I've covered in my normal procedures tutorial is to place the holding at the end of the legs page. So go to legs page, go to the very end, and you can see I've created a route discontinuity over here, and then entered the holding for the engine outset. The way you do this is first you insert the waypoint where you are going to hold, so in this case Whiskey Yankee Papa, then you just enter any artificial waypoint on top of it, for example Triple Alpha, put that on top of it, then the airplane creates a route discontinuity and puts Triple Alpha and then the engine out waypoint. So then you can just go to delete, remove that Triple Alpha, and suddenly you've got a discontinuity after the missed approach at your destination, together with the holding fix, and you can even enter the holding through the hold page over here. So, finally, where do we find the holding data? Well, that one is unfortunately not easily standardized. In the real world, we have it all in our takeoff performance calculator. Unfortunately, Blackbox doesn't deliver that data. So what you can do is either go to the en route chart and zoom in quite a bit. So, for example, over here we can see there's VIPA VOR. Now, if we zoom in enough and if we pick the correct chart, you can see here's a holding defined 259 inbound, left-hand turns, and if there is no text about the length of the holding, then it's 1 minute lag time below level 140, 1 minute 30 above level 140. Now, in this particular case, for the VIPA holding, I'm using 360 inbound left-hand turns, which is what my old company used to use, so that way, a little bit easier. You come in like this, you can fly, direct entry, easy going. Now, to which altitude are we going to climb then? Well, basically the next nearest 1,000 above the MSA. So, looking into the departure chart for Cologne over here, we got an MSA of 3,800. VIPA is located somewhere over here, so we want to climb to an altitude of 4,000 feet in this case. There are many cases where there is no specific engine out SID specified. In that case, you just simply climb straight ahead 25 miles. Again, climb to the nearest 1,000 above the MSA, and then you have all the time you need to set yourself up for the upcoming approach. Alright, so that's all the procedures. Let's quickly summarize the most important ones. So, if the call before V1 is keep going, there will be no actions below 400 feet except to cancel any warnings and raise the landing gear with a positive rate. At 400 feet, verify heading select and carry out the memory items. At the MFRA, buck up and retract the flaps on schedule. Flaps up no light, select level change, max continuous thrust, engage the automatics, non-normal checklist, and then we decide on the further course of action. Now, before we get started, one small tip. Do assign the rudder trim to a button on your joystick. You will be doing a lot of rudder trim, and it's not very handy to fly the airplane manually at a low altitude and look down here all the time to get the correct rudder trim. In general, how do we know that sufficient rudder has been applied? That's quite easy. As soon as the control column is level, we got the correct rudder. So if you don't need to make any aileron input to keep the airplane flying straight, that's the amount of rudder that you need. And that's what you want to trim the airplane to. Alright, that much about the theory. Now, let's go ahead and enable the failure in our FMC. Or actually, let's taxi onto the runway first, then we're going to do the failure second. So, parking brake is released. Transponder on, auto throttle armed, LNAV is selected, and all the lights are on. Okay, perfect. What we always do in the full flight simulator before we do a takeoff is a recall, just to see if there is anything that's popping up that might interfere with the exercise that we're about to carry out. Alright, so let's go ahead and line ourselves up on runway 13 left. Once the lineup is complete, we are going to insert the failure, and then we can get going. This was a lot of theory, but believe me, once you've done this a couple of times, things are going to become easy. So, we do want to take as much runway as possible. exactly for cases like what we are going to experience today. And here we go. Alright, so let's now insert the failure. We do this via going to Menu, PMDG Setup, Aircraft, Failures. And down here we can go to the engine page, Programmed Failure. And we do want to select engine 1 or 2. And you either want a VR cut, which leads to an engine failure when you rotate, or a V2 cut, which leads to the engine failure slightly after rotation. V1 cut, the engine is going to fail slightly before V1, so that you'd actually have to reject the takeoff. So today we're going to have an engine 1 VR cut, and we can tune that one active. And we do want to make it a little bit more interesting, so engine 1 is the one that's going to fail. So what I'm going to do, let's also insert an engine fire. So engine 1 fire. And I'm going to arm this to trigger in exactly 1 minute. That's usually the time it takes to conduct the takeoff run, plus a little bit of a rotation. Okay, so with that, we're pretty much ready to go. So let's go ahead and fail an engine. Alright, Boeing 738, winds calm, runway 13 left, cleared for takeoff. Stabilized, set takeoff thrust. Takeoff thrust set, indications normal.
80 knots.
Checked.
V1, rotate.
Oh, engine failure. Rotation rate slightly slower with an engine failure. And the initial pitch is going to be about 12.5 degrees. So, positive rate, gear up. Just cancel that. Apply as much rudder trim as you need to keep the airplane straight. Okay, we're reaching 400 feet. Select heading select. State malfunction. So we got 0 and 1. Engine fail flag is showing. 0 and 2 out, and we have a fire switch illuminated. It's a fire engine number 1. That's confirmed. Okay, engine fire memory items. Auto throttle if engaged, disengage. Disengaged. Thrust lever, engine number 1, confirm, close. Confirm, engine number 1, confirmed. And closed. So, what am I doing here? First fly the aircraft, huh? Okay, engine start lever, engine number 1, confirm cutoff. Confirm, number 1 confirmed. Cutoff. Okay, engine fire switch, engine number 1, confirm pull. Confirm, engine number 1 confirmed. Pull. If the engine fire switch or engine overheat light is illuminated, engine fire switch affected engine, rotate to the stop and hold for 1 second. It is illuminated, so rotate to the stop, held there for a second. The bottle discharge light does illuminate, so we know that the bottle has discharged. Okay, we've reached the MFRA. We are going to continue the memory items though, so we're just waiting for 30 seconds and we can see the fire is out. Okay, so buck up. And slightly adjust the heading box so that we maintain the runway center line here. Alright, next we are going to retract the flaps on schedule. And as soon as we're above the white dot, we can retract the flaps into position number 1. So flaps 1. We are passing the 60 ME, so left-hand turn to Whiskey Yankee Papa, and you can just put that on top, please. So let's grab it from the end of our relax page, copy, to the front, execute, LNAV available, select LNAV, and here we go, LNAV. So, flaps up, speed checked. So, waiting for flaps up, no lights. Here we go, flaps up, no lights. So, let's select level change. Set maximum continuous thrust, so we go to the N1 limit page and then select con, 97.8%. So, as you can see, we can increase the engine thrust quite a bit over here. So, let's do that. Have to do it manually. Here we go. 97.7, here we go. Okay, 1000 to go. Let's set the altitude. We want to climb to 4000 here. Cool, then we can engage the automatics, which means the autopilot. So make sure that the airplane is in trim. Command A, and here we go. Okay, beautiful. So we're now inbound to Whiskey Yankee Papa. We are leveling off. Let's always give ourselves a bit of a speed margin here, something like 225, 230 normally works pretty well, and normally you need about 75% N1, so let's set that, and as you can see, that works pretty well. You do not have auto throttle available in this situation. We need to manage thrust manually. Alright. So now that the autopilot is on, let's do the non-normal checklist, followed by the normal checklist, and then we can go into the decision making. So, engine fire, non-normal checklist, please. We once again go over the memory items here, so you always do read that. So that's auto throttle if engaged, disengage, disengaged. Thrust lever engine number 1 confirmed closed, engine number 1 is confirmed closed. Engine start lever engine number 1 confirmed cutoff, number 1 confirmed cutoff. Engine fire switch, engine number 1 confirmed pull. Number 1 is confirmed pulled. And if the engine fire switch or engine overheat light is illuminated, it is no longer. So from there we can go into the remainder of the checklist, which is going to be, choose one. Are you on the ground or are you in flight? Well, we're in flight. So, if after 30 seconds the engine fire switch or engine overheat light stays illuminated, that is no longer the case. Choose one. High airframe vibration occurs and continues after the engine is shut down, or high airframe vibration does not occur or does not continue after the engine is shut down. Well, I do not feel any vibration over here, do you? No? Alright, perfect. So then go to step 9. Isolation valve switch, close. So, isolation valve switch, close. Pack switch affected side off. This causes the operating pack to regulate to high flow in flight with the flaps up. So, that's the left side. So, left pack switch off. That means the right pack is automatically going to go into high flow. APU bleed out switch off. Off. Choose one. APU is available for start, or APU is not available. It is available today, so APU start. When the APU is running, APU generator switch affected side on. So now we have a little bit of time available. And I would always recommend to use that time just to gather some weather information from nearby airports. You can simply do this through the ACARS system, so menu, data link, ATS, ATIS, and we can get the weather at Cologne, where we came from, and we can also get the weather, for example, at Düsseldorf. Like this. Cool. So, APU is almost there. So, when APU is running, APU generator switch affected side on. And here's a little caveat. So, when the generator is switched on, the on-side autopilot is going to disengage. So for this reason, we are going to switch over to Command B, since engine number 1 is the engine that is down, and now we can switch on the APU generator on the affected side only. And now we can switch back to Command A. If you don't do this, then the autopilot is just going to trip off the moment that you engage the APU generator on the affected side. Okay, so APU generator switch left side on, then we go to the next step in the checklist. With no fuel in the center tank, fuel quantity on the operative engine side should be less than the quantity on the failed side. If not, suspect the fuel leak, do not balance fuel. So let's have a look. We've got the left engine is down and the wing tank is pretty much full. The right engine is operating and we got less fuel on the right hand side. We do have a bit in the center tank, and do note that if the center tank fuel pumps are on, then you will not see any imbalance here, because both engines would draw fuel from the center tank. Today, the center tank fuel pumps are off, so we do have the right side lower. For this reason, we can balance the fuel. Now, fuel balancing is pretty easy, can be done from memory, so that's simply low must go after the cross feed is open. So first we open the cross feed, the valve goes bright, then dim. Now the right hand side is the lower side, so low must go, right pumps are going off. Now the left tank is feeding the right engine through the cross feed valve. We do have a master caution fuel, which is caused by the low pressure lights up there, which we can cancel. Okay, then let's continue. Transponder mode selected, TA only. This prevents climb commands which can exceed single engine performance capability. So transponder mode selector, TA only. So, isolation valve switch after the fire has been extinguished, which it has, auto. This step ensures bleed air is available to both wings if wing anti-ice is needed. So isolation valve switch, auto. Plan to land at the nearest suitable airport. Do not use FMC performance predictions. And that's the engine fire non-normal checklist completed. As you can see, that's pretty easy stuff. So from here we would go into a decision-making procedure, think about which airports are suitable, where we can land. Obviously Cologne nearby is an airport where we've just taken off from. We know the weather is good, we can see it. Düsseldorf is also nearby, also an airport we could fly into. Generally, do we have handling facilities? Do we have appropriate emergency facilities? And when all of that is a given, then you can think about the economical side of things. So, do you have maintenance over there? Do you have passenger handling over there? And all that kind of stuff. But that's all going to come when we run our decision making. For now, we still got to do the after takeoff checklist, since the non-normal checklist is complete. So, after takeoff checklist, we are always going to keep the engine start switches in continuous, because when you do not do that and the electronic engine control powers down 5 minutes after switching the EEC switch off, then you are going to get some spurious warnings, which you really don't need at this moment. So just leave the engine start switch on the failed side on as well. Okay, so after takeoff checklist, air conditioning and pressurization is at 1.2, slightly climbing and set. Obviously the air conditioning panel is going to look a little bit different, so that's set. Yeah, and then we got the altimeters, QNH 1018 maintaining 4000. And that's already our non-normal checklist complete. So from here, we would really get into the decision making. We would also make a PA to the passengers, advising them that something went wrong. So announcing our intentions to them, and most importantly telling them that the company is going to take care of them, so that they have something to think about rather than getting annoyed that you are still flying around in circles. When all of that is done, we would start to prepare for the approach, but the single engine approach is going to get a dedicated tutorial video so that these things don't get out of hand and don't get too long. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. As always, leave a like, comment and subscribe. Let me know what you think about the video, because that's the only way we can improve the channel. And if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.